almost everything in the country, COVID including, is taking a bit of a backseat to the social unrest from the killings that I mentioned earlier. And so last week I shared my own reflections that under the headline Enough, and that spurred quite a bit of response from our organization internally and also with some external stakeholders as we began to share a little more broadly. And so I was heartened by the response. As a white man and a white man of privilege, I wasn't sure if my message was on the mark, if it was going to resonate. It has with at least some people. And so we had some reaction from the organization asking for us to create some forums where we could have some broader discussions about what we as an organization could do internally, externally, how we operate ourselves around curriculum and other things. And so there were some really good things that came out of that. My role was really just listening and learning, and I learned a lot. I was humbled by the experiences that many of you shared with me and with us. And so I wanted to, Tommy and Natalia had led their leadership to those forums of facilitation and gathering and so forth, and will also be involved in helping to lead the next steps. And so I wanted them to join this morning and to share their own reflections about the forums and then talk about what we've done already and where we go from here. So with that, I want to pass it to my colleague, Natalia Flores. Natalia?
Thank you, Randy. Last week was very emotional, I think for everybody in different spectrums. And, I do want to thank you, Randy, for just putting out the video. As we heard in some of the forums, like you didn't have to, but you did. And it's important because we do need, it's that space right now that we need to really use our voices. And that was the intentions of the forums, like really creating a space for people to share their voices we've never heard before, voices that have taught us a lot. And, it was really good to hear everybody. And it was also really emotionally draining because, our staff who serve our community, as well as, any other person of color, are hurting in some way. And even if you weren't, if you're not a person of color, you're hurting in a different way. And, really creating the space was important because we have to find a way to heal. So when the pandemic started, Randy, you have always questioned us, like what are we doing as leaders right now to create something, a change? And, I think through one of the forums, Yolanda said, George Floyd was a sacrifice, the sacrifice that led us to this conversation. And she was right. And it's hard to say it that way because nobody wants to sacrifice a life. But that life that was sacrificed has created so much in a lot of us. And that's why we're seeing all the protests. We see everything, and at the end of the day, our job was to listen to our staff. How are they doing? Just listen to them, acknowledge it, learn, and then we get to adapt as we can with the organization. And so you, in a sense, called us to action, and the forums were an immediate response to that call to action. And we have many more to come. But, it was really, it was emotional, but it was also uplifting to hear everybody's perspective. It's a roller coaster, it's a spectrum, and it's everywhere in between. And that's what makes us as an organization, and really that's what makes us as a country. So listening to all those voices has been so educational for us, as we move forward. And then it's reality, and so we need to deal with reality as we move forward, both in our personal lives and as we move forward with the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I concur with what both of you are saying. Personally, last week was very hard. The week before that was very hard. And what I appreciated most is that as a community, we pulled together to discuss the pain, to discuss the emotion, as well as to discuss the possibility. And what I found in last week's conversation was an opportunity to take a breath, an opportunity to heal some of the pain that I hold within about the conditions that we face in society, and in particular, as an African American man in society, that I have faced personally, that my brothers, that my family members, that I have seen in the larger society Black men face in general. Um, I was heartened that we as a community in pain, could come together and really see one another. Not all of the perspectives were the same, and I was appreciative of that as well. As an organization, we say that we're here to change the odds for kids, and I still concur that the best way to change the odds for kids is to change the world that they live in. The work that we do is social justice work, and we get to lean into that aspect of our work more so now.
Yeah, I would just, from my perspective, the way that we change the odds for kids is through our staff. And one of the comments that came up that resonated with me is sort of like when you're on an airplane and the oxygen mask, comes down. They said, take care of yourself first, before you take care of the passengers beside you. And that's what I feel like we have to take care of our staff, and our staff has to be strong and solid and able in order to take care of the kids and to change the odds for children and youth. And so last week, I was heartened by the response and the leadership of Tommy and Natalia and everybody that participated in the forum, so we could begin to take some of those steps for our staff around these issues and move our organization forward in a social justice way more progressively than we have to date. Natalia, why don't you talk a little bit about what's happened so far and what's going to happen next?
Yeah, so in the forums, people were asking what next. So what next? We're going to have these forums, and what next? And it was such a valid question. And it comes with, we've been here before. Is this going to be a one-time thing? And then what? And so, we were clear in the forums, and we want to be clear now, like, no, it's not a one-time thing. We believe in this work. We believe in our families. We believe in our staff. And it is important for us to kind of move through this direction forward to really create change. Two people had said something that, although I've heard it before, it's something about when they said it that for me it resonated. So Linda said, let's try to make change, in this space. And then David said, it's our moment. And we want to really move forward with that, because it is our moment to create change within ourselves and the organization. So the immediate next steps that happen, we heard from the staff, it's heavy, and people couldn't focus on work because they had to worry about their children, their sons, their daughters, their brothers. And yes, who can work in that space? Who can focus on completing an LMS course while they're worried for the life of their family members? So right away, the organization responded with the 24 hours of reflection. So Randy, you sent the email the next day, and people can take benefit from it as they see fit. So that was an immediate first response to what we heard from the forums. And then the other pieces is there was another forum that's going to be added, because we did have a wait list. So we're trying to respond to the need as soon as we can. And I think that the key one that I want to share that's an immediate next step is that Randy called the board to join in this. And in one of the forums, we had our board chair, John Lee, and he participated in the forum and got to experience the pain and the situation of the organization he serves. And that's super important because, in the forums, we talked a lot about how we can change, and we can, but others too. How do we inform others? And to be able to be a part of an organization that wants to involve the board in that level is super important. And so that's also an immediate step that's coming up. And if you were part of the forums as a staff member, we want to hear from you. So we probably will be reaching out. Don't be surprised if you get an email from Tommy or myself, because we want to create and increase the level of awareness across all levels of the organization. And that's a really key next step that we have committed to and are going to move forward.
In addition to the immediate things that we have done and put in place, we also got a lot of feedback about things that we can do and investigate looking forward. understanding that equity and social justice are not just ideals, they're lenses through which we can look at our collective work. There were a lot of recommendations for taking a look at our curriculum and seeing where there are opportunities to incorporate more culturally relevant, culturally responsive curriculum lessons into what we're presenting to our young people. And so we have already begun to make that investigation, and we'll continue to dig into that space so that we can ensure that wherever we have a leverage point, that we are leveraging it on behalf of our young people, their awareness around culture, diversity, inclusion, and social justice. We've also heard very consistently that we want this conversation to continue. We want forums for us to be able to engage in this community as think together around how these issues and these topics continue to bubble up. It's come in the form of a request for a task force. We are definitely beginning the investigation as to how do we make that happen both at an organizational level as well as at regional levels so that we can continue to learn together in this space. So we want everyone to know that our hearts are open, our ears are open as a collective so that we can be as responsive and that we can take full advantage of this moment.
One of the other things in my videos over the last couple of weeks, my messages, I've talked some about our values, and the organizational values are really kind of a reflection of my personal values. But Tommy also suggested and challenged us a little bit to maybe expand those values to include a couple more values. Tommy, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so the work that we do is equity work. It has always been equity work. Changing the odds for kids is a statement about social justice. So we have the opportunity as an organization to lead with the values. We already speak them. We already have incorporated them into our work. It's now an opportunity to elevate them into the group of values that we use to identify ourselves in the world.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really open and excited to embrace that. A couple of other things, just as we wrap up. We also want to use our social media platforms and voice around that. And as we form our task force, maybe there's a sub piece of that or part of the task force that works with our marketing communications department and our folks on social media to build more of a social justice lens, and the folks that already have backgrounds and have worked with Black Lives Matter and other organizations that are steeped in that already. I think they could accelerate our learning curve and our move into that space. And so we want to maybe tap into some of that talent and experience from other parts of the organization that could support our efforts around that. And then as Tommy and Natalia mentioned, engaging the board of directors. And we're already seeing in response to the Enough message that some of our board members who run their own organizations have put out messages inspired by Enough to their organizations. So it is a ripple effect out into it. It takes, it's going to take all of us in the nation, linking arms in various ways to move this agenda forward. And so, and to open people's minds and hearts and see things differently. And I've been heartened by the sustainability of the protests. I think we're now in 12 or 13 days of it, and it's growing and it's peaceful. And some of the looting and violence that happened, in the earlier days is calming down, and I think it's being more directive, but it's growing in presence. And I think it's certainly got the nation's and the world's attention, and that's a step in that in that progression. But we need to cash in on some of those steps. Just to raise awareness, as we've seen ourselves, is not enough. is we have to make some real change. But progress has been made over the last 12 or 13 days, I think, as a country, and I'm very heartened by it. And one of the things in closing today, we wanted to share with you. I got an email from some of our site coordinators out in Lake Elsinore this morning, and they were inspired by the Enough message, and they went to downtown Lake Elsinore over the weekend, where some of the businesses were boarded up and so forth, and they painted murals on some of the boarded up buildings, and they shared one with me that I wanted to share with all of you, a picture of George Floyd and the slogan, Enough. Thanks, everybody. We're in this together, and we look forward to making progress for ourselves, our communities, and the children and youth that we serve. So thanks, everybody. Have a great week.